1. This happened about 20 years ago, back when our village was still quiet and far less populated than it is today. Just dirt roads, wide open yards, and neighbors who knew each other well enough to ask for sugar, coffee, hot water, or start a feud over a fence line. There was this teenage boy from a few houses down, around 14 or 15, who loved riding his beat-up BMX bike like he was training for the X Games. The main dirt road passed right by our property, but for whatever reason he preferred cutting through our yard, and not just anywhere, but straight through my father's plants. My dad had a small garden back then, nothing fancy, just some shrubs, flowering plants, and a few vegetables growing in neat rows. It was his pride, something he tended to every day. So you can imagine his frustration every time the kid zoomed through and left tire marks across the soil. Dad warned him more than once, "Stick to the road, don't ride over the plants." The boy would nod and mumble an apology, but the next afternoon, there he'd be again, carving tracks right where he wasn't supposed to. Now, my dad isn't the kind to yell or make a scene, but he is the kind to get a little creative. One day he went out back to the old shed near the edge of our property. It was a broken-down thing, leaning to one side and filled with old tools and scrap wood. From inside he pulled out a nasty-looking plank, weathered and full of rusty nails. It looked like it had fallen off the shed itself. He placed it just off the edge of the garden, right where the kid usually cuts across, and lightly covered it with some dry leaves and dirt. It blended in perfectly. To anyone riding through fast, it had looked just like a patch of ground. The next day, like clockwork, we heard the familiar sound of bike tires crunching dirt, then pop, sss, followed by a startled yell. The boy had hit the trap dead on. Front tire was blown out. He stood there, staring at his bike in disbelief. About an hour later, he came back with his mother. She was angry, demanding to know why there were nails on the ground. Dad met them, calm as ever. "Why would you do something like that?" she asked, pointing at the boy's damaged bike. Dad just said, "Where exactly was he riding?" The boy quietly and with a bit of guilt pointed toward the garden. "And where did I tell him not to ride?" my father asked. There was a long silence. Then Mom turned to her son and gave him a scolding so fierce, I think the birds flew out of the trees. No more questions, no more blaming. Just a red-faced teenager and his mom hauling the busted bike home, down the very dirt road he should have stayed on in the first place. My dad, he went back to watering his plants like nothing happened. The garden stayed undisturbed after that. 2. I'm 34, non-binary, and was renting this tiny studio, if this place was 20 square meters, I'll eat my jacket, apartment, that went up for sale. All through the process, I was polite and careful with the agents, making sure the tiny space was always clean. It was so small that any mess looked major. Making sure I was available at convenient times when they needed to do maintenance, etc. Then they decided they needed to paint the apartment, including the bathroom. And because I had one window in my kitchenette, nothing else, it would be very hard to breathe in there until it dried. So I did what I knew I shouldn't and told the agent I was going overseas for 2 weeks and they could paint then. But because I had valuables in the apartment, including my inherited MacBook I was trying to download photos off, I insisted they had to make the appointments with my dad to be in the apartment, and they could not access without him there. About halfway through my trip, I realized my dad hadn't mentioned anything about the painting, so I asked him, and he said they never contacted him. So I immediately called the agent, only to discover that the painting was completed. Photos had been taken, and they were preparing open houses. I was told I could not stop them. One of their open houses was planned for 8 a.m. the day after I arrived home. I told them no, it wasn't, and if they showed up at that time, not only would my unpacked suitcase be spread around the small space, but I would answer the door in my underwear. I'm a pretty large person, this would not be a pleasant sight. I got home at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night and discovered they had photographed the apartment in such a way that every tech item in the apartment was on full display on the for sale sign outside the property, on the website, and in the newspaper. Guess who knocked on my door at 8 a.m.? And guess what I did? As promised, I answered the door in my underwear, my suitcase and dirty clothes all over the floor. The agent profusely apologized and said they'd forgotten which day was being rescheduled, and ran away. Then a couple of days later, when I was back at work, I discovered that several pieces of jewelry were missing, gone during the open house viewings. The agent didn't care, insisted they were watching everyone in the apartment, so I went online. I posted Google reviews, Facebook reviews, complaints on their website. I got a phone call that I was getting my rent heavily discounted for that month, and that the agents had to slow the open houses from 4 a week to 2. They never sold the place. It was a hole. But I will never forget that answering the door in my underwear got me the power I needed over those jerks. 3. This happened a couple of years ago. I'm a 39-year-old woman, and I'm a certified teacher with a master-level recognition from my state. This equates to basically being a good teacher that goes above and beyond, but also comes with perks including a pretty nice yearly bonus and getting to bypass certain paperwork requirements. This is important. I worked for a fairly large and relatively decent charter school system for about 10 years. I taught world geography and world cultures, and was pretty well liked by my students. Mostly because I gave as good as I got, but also focused on having a fun and interesting class rather than meeting metrics. At the district level, they loved me because I wrote a lot of my own curriculum and exceeded metrics, and they placed me in multiple district positions including curriculum writing, training, and subject leadership, all of which came with extra pay. However, my principal hated me. He was deeply sexist, even more deeply incompetent, and did not know how to deal with someone like me who was unwilling to put up with either. I have a business background and learned how to write professional screw-yous in truly satisfying ways. During my time working there, I became the person who would convey staff complaints about many things, including things like communication, safety, salary, non-contract demands, etc. We had a lot of issues, especially since our state makes it pretty hard to unionize, and they were constantly trying to get away with illegal things. Obviously, this made my principal and some of the other admins hate me. But they couldn't discipline me since I always wrote with professional language, cited educational notes, and included evidence. In addition, to not actually doing anything wrong outside of calling them on their nonsense. Furthermore, my students did well, and both they and the parents generally liked me. Add to it that the district liked me, and I was basically an annoyance they could do nothing against, including refusing to renew my contract. That is until the end of the 2021 to 2022 school year. At this point, we were told that the principal was leaving, but was being replaced by one of the other admins who had a bad reputation through the district. I decided to give them a chance, though, and hoped that some of the illegal and sexist nonsense would stop. Spoiler, it didn't. This announcement was then followed by them telling me that they were moving my grade levels from 6th grade to 9th grade on level and 10th grade AP. This would mean a massive change in grade, having to learn 2 new curriculums, and having to become AP certified. Plus all those district positions. Yeah, they were tied to my grade level, which is why they couldn't move me before. So I would effectively be losing about $6,000 a year. They explained that this had to happen because they needed to use my ability to bypass paperwork that came with being a master-level teacher, for reasons related to post-COVID education. When my district-level contacts found out, they were angry but couldn't do anything because it was a valid change and saved the district money with the bypass. I decided to bite the bullet and just do it, partially because it meant teaching students I'd had before, which is a huge help, and because, well, I live in a state that is actively passing laws to prevent history teachers like me from existing, and I didn't want to fight that fight at a public ISD. So, fall 2022 rolls around and I go full force into it. Get a good relationship with my students and try to get along with the new admins, except they basically immediately tried to get me to commit fraud, and as I found out, a lot of the communication being sent by my old principal was actually written by the new one. But I love my students. The inciting incident that finally caused me to snap actually didn't have to do with teaching. Instead, it was my child. At the time, they were taking in-person classes at a community college about 10 minutes away from my campus, and they only had a driving permit. My city doesn't do public transport. I asked one of the admins if it would be okay if they came to school with me each morning, hung out for an hour, and then I would take them to campus during my off period. They said it was okay, especially as my child had actually been a volunteer on campus for many years. 3 weeks into this arrangement, I get an email that my child is being detained in the front lobby, and that I need to take them home. The reason? They were quietly doing their homework in the teacher's lounge, and Professor Karen didn't like that. I told them that they could let me wait 20 minutes to take my child when the campus opened, or get a substitute for the day. They told me to wait, and check my child in appropriately next time. 2 days later, I get called into the principal's office for a formal meeting. When I get there, the entire admin team is waiting, and there are even papers ready for me to sign. To say they looked smug at finally being able to write me up is an understatement. And the reason? I brought my child onto campus. At first, I was genuinely confused because staff regularly brought their children to campus, especially since most of our children went to different schools that didn't have the same holiday schedule. It had never been a problem, but now it was. So I was going to need to sign a written reprimand for not following a procedure that hadn't even been put into place yet. That wasn't even the stupidest part. See, the principal had decided that I was bringing my child to campus all on my own. When I finally interrupted them and pointed to the admin I had gotten permission from, the principal looked startled. They had never even communicated, and I was getting disciplined for something I had permission to do, which the admin confirmed during the meeting. Suddenly, I was being told never mind about the write-up, but that I needed to find a new plan for my child's getting to school. As I left, I made comment about maybe needing to find a new job instead, which gave them a moment of panic. Being a responsible adult, I went home to discuss it with my husband, and we both agreed that it was time for me to go. Between the yearly bonus and the time worked but as yet paid, due to the way teachers' salaries work, I could quit and still get close to $30,000, enough to give me time to find another job. My husband is amazing and, like myself, is pretty petty, so we both decided to wait. 2 weeks from the date in question, we were having a tutorial on weekend campus. This meant that I could enter without anybody knowing unless they checked the cameras. So that weekend, when the building was opened, my husband and I emptied my classroom. And if you've been a teacher, you can appreciate the amount of crap I had accumulated over 10 years. I had taken home less obvious things during those weeks, but my classroom went from the most poster TV set-looking room to a wasteland in an hour. Many of the things that made the room usable were mine too, so that was more fun. More hilarious, the following Monday was campus training day, so I went and got paid one more day to screw around with my coworkers, a couple of which knew my plan and were excited. On Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., I emailed in my resignation, as well as a still professional list of grievances, including many specific criticisms of the admin and an outright statement of many of the illegal things they were doing. And then I went back to sleep. From what my colleagues told me, it was an absolute mess. It took them 30 minutes to realize that my first period class didn't have a teacher. By that time, the other members of my department, whom I had kindly CC'd on the email, had covertly sent it to all the other teachers on campus. By the end of the day, I heard that one of my coworkers had read it to a class of students that knew me, and that several parents had read it too. I had given my colleagues permission to give one of my emails to my students because I did love them, and by the end of day, my inbox was filled with some heartwarming notes and promises to carry my legend forward. I kept in contact with several students until they got a new teacher so they didn't fail their AP exams. It took the camps 3 months to find a replacement. Part of this was because they had to find someone with the same qualifications, that paperwork bypass, but couldn't, and eventually just had to hire a new teacher and an additional tutor. Outside of that, some of my information is inconsistent. I was told that there were parent complaints and questions about if what I had said was true. One of the other teachers decided to carry on my torch and started pushing back on things in my place. And finally, since I also just happened to send the email to the superintendent, the new principal was under a lot of scrutiny for some of the illegal and against district policies they had started enacting, and, strangely, that principal was asked to leave campus at the end of that year. The new principal is actually someone I worked with before and is apparently doing great things for the campus, so that's good. I still occasionally get emails telling me that the students miss me, and I plan to go visit the campus soon to give other teachers some of my supplies. I decided to go work from home, but for the most part things have quieted down now, which is what is best for the students in the end. 4. Back in high school, I took an accounting class. The teacher, Mr. S., was a bit of a jerk. While he lectured once a week, the rest of the week spent doing workbooks solo. His rule was everyone had one full period to hand their work in once the first person handed theirs in. Since it was basically adding and subtracting, I generally finished in 45 minutes and then messed around with my friend in the back of the class, he was also fast, until someone else handed in their paper. Mr. S. didn't like that I finished quickly and was talking, so he moved my seat right next to his desk. At that point, instead of talking, I'd sleep while waiting for people to turn in their papers. One day Mr. S. was lecturing, and in my half-asleep stage, I saw the electrical cord of an overhead projector, yes, I'm old, land on my desk and start moving toward me. I didn't think about it until 10 seconds later when it was wrapped around my throat. It was tight enough that I couldn't breathe. I first tried to elbow him, but the chair back was in the way. Then I tried to pull the overhead projector off its desk so that I could swing it at him. I doubt it would have swung, but I was panicking. When the projector was about to go over, he stopped and yelled, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what are you doing?" I turned around and screamed, "I couldn't effing breathe, you a-hole!" Since I was young, I didn't think there was anything I could do, and didn't tell another adult until months later. It was the guidance counselor, and she told me there was nothing she could do, including changing my classes. If I was older and wiser, I would have called bull and filed assault charges. I wanted the revenge. For extra credit, Mr. S. had students sell boxes of candy for $5. I think it was for charity, but I have no real idea. I was running an A in the class, so I usually ignored it. This time I asked for a box of candy. He looked very confused, but gave me one. Instead of selling it for $5, I sold it to my friend for $2. The next day at the beginning of the class, he asked everyone individually except me if they had the money. He then asked if anyone else had money for him. I raised my hand and said me. Even though my desk was next to his, I got up and walked around my desk to his, so that I was behind him. Then I put my hand out and thump! A handful of pennies landed on his desk. The class all looked up. Thump! A second handful of pennies. The class burst out laughing. Thump! A third handful of pennies and continued laughter. I returned to my seat, reached in my pocket, and flicked one last penny onto the pile. He was angry. He told me that he wanted money. My response, "Pennies are legal tender. I thought you'd know that as an accounting teacher." He then dumped the pennies on my desk. I put my workbook on top of them and did my work with pennies falling everywhere. At the end of the class, I dumped the pennies back in my pocket. The next day he waited until the end of class and asked me for the money. I still gave him pennies. He asked, "Did you at least roll them?" My response, "Hell no." And I tossed a bag of pennies at him. I'm pretty sure I didn't get in trouble because he was worried about the entire story coming out. This was likely 1993, possibly 92, depending when in the year it happened. 5. Background. I work at a company where I handle mid to high level complaints to managers, PR, and legal. My daily requirement is 40 cases handled per day. There are some of my team colleagues that struggle with this, but I don't. And I don't feel lazy to stop at 40, so I have handled 50, 55, basically every day for the past 2 years. There is no bonus or even recognition for this. I just did it because I felt a friendly obligation to the company. Complaints can be a 5-minute resolution or a 2-hour Zoom call with our New York lawyers. It's a gamble, really. The event. Recently, I had a day where I felt a bit sick, and at the same time, had bad luck of getting only very hard cases that required more time. So I had 39 cases, one under the requirement. I thought nothing of it, as my weekly average was way off the charts, 50 plus as usual. The very next day, I felt better and went back to my usual high numbers. Come Monday, I had an emergency one-on-one with my manager, where I was informed that I had to attend a 3-day workshop and seminar on how to best meet requirements because I underperformed last week. My jaw dropped, and I asked, don't they count the weekly, monthly, yearly numbers? Which I was told, daily requirement is 40, and this is standard practice. Nothing we can do. Basically, it was a workshop for underperformers who had 20 to 30 out of 40 cases daily. It was nothing hard, but I did need to drive there for 3 days after work and listen to HR guys giving bad advice. Hell freezers nope, I'll bloody well hope it was paid. As they never actually handled cases in real life, and I had to talk about what I will do to improve my numbers and reach the 40, as the nonsense HR talk calls it. This made me lose hours and hours of my free time, and I was livid. After it was over, I had a long think, and I decided that I will do exactly that. I will reach the 40, and that's it. The aftermath. For the past few months, I go to work, I handle 40 cases, my daily requirement, and then I do nothing for the rest of my shift. I have had multiple one-on-ones with my manager during this time, and I am constantly asked, "Is something wrong?" To which I naively reply, "No, am I in trouble? Am I underperforming?" And then, of course, they say that I am 100% within daily requirements, and that way I shut the conversation down. This is real life, so I can't really say a clever comeback or something like that, but I do keep playing the fool. That is no idea what is wrong now, but I find satisfaction in knowing that they got used to my overachieving and are now suffering for the lack of it. Before Easter, they put up an internal ad for promoting to other managers. So my guess is how that is the number of people they will now need to pay extra, just because they lost me as an overachiever, and they lost me for no reason other than their own stupidity. Hey folks, thanks a lot for listening to Revenge's Ice Cream 411, and big thanks to the folks who let me use their stories in this video. If you would like to support the channel, there are options for doing so in the description, Patreon, merchandise, that sort of thing. Not obligated, but very much appreciated if you choose to go that route. And let's see, I don't think we have any other business today. Nope, I don't believe there's any shout-outs today. So let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, for those of you who drink coffee, how do you like it? Do you like to grind your beans? Do you like to have coffee bags? That's something I've heard of but never used, never really had a reason to. Do you like instant or do you enjoy coffee pods? Let me know what you think in a comment below. And if you don't like coffee, what do you have to wake you up in the morning? If you need anything, maybe you're just one of those people who's full of energy. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. This one came from Revenge's Ice Cream 409, and it was, "Are weekends still a thing for you?" So let's see. Today's answer comes from Lauren. "When I worked, it was Saturday and Sunday, except when I first started working in the mid-80s, when program management was asked to share our VAX mainframes with another program. We were then forced to work one of 3 shifts and a mandatory 8 hours of unpaid overtime a week. At least 4 of them on Saturday or Sunday. Our workload didn't require it, we just had to log onto the computer to show we were too busy to share. I cannot imagine them getting away with that today. Unpaid work? Hell no. I thought the US got rid of slavery back in 1865. Anyway, I'm retired now and have 7 days off in a row." Thank you very much for your answer, Lauren, and I do envy that you are a lady of leisure these days, and I hope you enjoy your retirement very much. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.